Okay, welcome everybody. Everybody's here for our speakers, correct, Rebecca?
I haven't seen Jill yet.
But Jill, I think, is going last, so we'll get started and she'll jump in, hopefully. My name is Karen Gels. I'm the director at Farmingdale State College Library. I'm really happy to see all of you here on a Friday afternoon. We have 4 lightning round speakers today, and each speaker will get a total of 10 minutes, and then we will hold questions until all 4 speakers have completed. So you can put them in the chat. I'll monitor that at the end, or you can unmute and ask questions at the end also. Please keep yourself muted during the talk. Our first speakers are going to be Jamia Williams, who is the Health Sciences Librarian at SUNY Brockport's Drake Memorial Library, and Twanna Hodge, who is the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Librarian at the University of Florida Libraries.
All right, all. Let me just share my screen, and then let me make sure that this is enter first screen, move this, and we are ready to go.
Okay, hello, welcome to our lightning talk, our pink drink chats, the importance of mentoring, formal, informal, and peer. Our session description. Mentorship is a way to cultivate a mutually respectful and beneficial relationship with an individual through consistent nurturing with being vulnerable and honest about various topics. Sometimes these interactions need a Starbucks pink drink. We're not advertising for them, but we love the pink drink to help process challenging issues and situations. It allows us to commiserate, take a step back to reframe the problem, and a brief respite from the demands of the work and personal commitments. It offers a space to engage in community care and support each other's well-being. Participants will leave with several takeaway strategies for inclusive mentoring, especially for Black, Indigenous, people of color, BIPOC, early career librarians. This is our land acknowledgement. The purpose of these statements is to show respect for Indigenous peoples and recognize their enduring relationship to the land. Practicing acknowledgement can also raise awareness about histories that are often suppressed or forgotten. We would like to acknowledge those who were forcibly taken and enslaved on what we now know as the United States of America. Juneteenth is now a federal holiday. So who are we? Hello, I'm Jamia Williams, pronouns she, her, hers. Currently, I'm the Health Sciences Librarian at SUNY Brockport Drake Memorial Library.
And hello, my name is Twanna Hodge, pronouns she, her, hers. I'm the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Librarian at the University of Florida Libraries. So you're probably wondering, how is someone who's in Florida presenting at SUNYLA? And so this is connected to how Jamia and I met. So we met when I was working at SUNY Upstate Medical University in a health sciences library. I was one of the academic and research librarians. I was also hired there, and part of my responsibilities was helping to craft a diversity fellowship. And so that is where Jamia and I met, or when she was employed as the first librarian and diversity fellow, and we met in June of 2019. So it's been 3 years. And so next up, Jamia.
Yep. Oh, you said 2019, it's 2018.
2018, oh my.
Yes. It's like 3 years, it's been the 3 years. I don't know, what is it? So approaches to mentorship. The types of mentorship that you can have are formal, informal, and peer. Formal mentorship is usually structured and is coordinated by an institution or organization. Informal mentorship is often happens between 2 people who decide to have a mentor type of relationship. This can be structured, unstructured, and semi-structured, depending on what they want to do. Peer mentorship is a relationship between 2 people that are at the same career stage. This can also be structured, unstructured, and semi-structured.
There we go. So what is mentorship? Mentorship is a way to cultivate a mutually respectful and beneficial relationship with an individual through consistent nurturing, and that means being vulnerable and honest about various topics. And it's, meant to make it easier for those coming after us, beside us, and those ahead of us. But mentorship is not a substitution for sponsorship, championing, supervision, etc.
So we'd like to talk about the importance of mentoring. So why is mentoring important? For me, I think mentoring is a give and take relationship that should cultivate a safe space for vulnerability and truth-telling. Navigating this profession can be difficult, so mentorship has been one of the keys to my success.
And so for me, it is learning from the mentee about new ideas, knowledge, perspectives. For me, it's about giving back, pulling us at climb. And mentoring for me is a way that it provides a bridge for the gaps that exist in librarianship and the workplace. So why is mentoring important? The mentoring of BIPOC early career librarians important is to support their professional, personal career growth and development, as well as ways to address tokenization, racial bad fatigue, cultural isolation, white supremacy culture, and etc. that exists in librarianship.
What needs to be taken into account when mentoring a BIPOC library worker? Audre Lorde said it perfectly. There is no thing as a single issue struggle, because we do not live single issue lives. Keep this in mind when mentoring a BIPOC library worker. So what are the benefits for the mentee? In my opinion, this has helped me with the unwritten rules of the workplace. Also, it's a place to cultivate my ideas and gain the support and the guidance that I need.
So for me, it has been a sense of rejuvenation, as well as gaining support and different perspectives, as well as supporting the development of mentees.
What are the benefits for the institution, organization, or association? This might increase the chances of retention, and your institution reaps the benefits of the mentees network.
And what are the benefits for librarianship? Quite frankly, having healthier library workers and those who are going to be invested in the profession over time. So some takeaway strategies for inclusive mentoring. And so when Jamia and I were coming up with this, there could be a lot more that's currently not on this list. So this is not, an extensive list. But one of the things is understanding you and your mentees' identities, racial, ethnic, the list goes on, engaging in vulnerability, having building up to that, but making sure that you provide the time and the space to engage in that, cultural humility, being culturally humble, adapting, and other oriented perspective and understanding that you don't know everything that no one can know everything there is about someone else's culture, and making sure that you're not going into it with perceptions, acknowledging the power dynamics and minimizing or addressing them as much as possible. Intellectual humility. You don't know what you don't know, and we don't know everything. Emotional intelligence, being able to read the room, being able to self-regulate in terms of your emotions. Being human-centered, having a human-centered approach. Being able to understand that we're not cogs in a wheel, and that we have a lot of different experiences, and understanding that we have all engaged in trauma. When we've been through this collective trauma that is COVID-19, and for a lot of us dealing with the racial traumas on top of that. And so having a healing and trauma-centered approach, being supportive, open-minded, flexible, mentally This is not in terms of like physical flexibility. This is mentally flexible. Okay, we're not ableist. You know, being self-aware, communicative. You know, so being open, but also making sure that you have your boundaries, but responding to people in a timely manner. Having the ability to intervene and call people in. Having a reflective practice of being able to take that time to sit and engage, whether you do that individually or one-on-one, being honest and being open to conflict and not being conflict avoidant. And so here is our wonderful references. As you know, we are library workers and we love our references. And then here are some resources for folks to dive more into. And then this is how you can get in contact with us. And thank you for listening to our presentation.
Thank you so much.
Thanks to both of you for a wonderful first lightning round. Next up, we have Ryan King, who is a library assistant 4 at Columbia University's CV Star East Asian Library. Thank you.
Hi there. Let me just get my presentation ready. Okay. Hi everyone, my name is Ryan King. The title of my presentation today is All Panels, No Borders, Measuring Access to Comic Book and Graphic Novel Collections in Academic Libraries and Archives. As prior stated, I'm a library assistant at Columbia University's East Asian Library. I'm also a recent graduate of Queens College's dual degree program, MLS and MA in History. And before I begin, I'm just going to give a brief overview of comics and graphic novels in academic libraries collections, just to say that there continues to grow a lot of popularity and support in these collections. Comic studies at the moment is very akin to film studies in the 1970s, and that's to say that it's just beginning and it's even going to grow more popular. As a result, in North America, there contains several of the world's largest comic collections. I'll give a couple overview of some of those, such as the Billy Ireland Cartoon Library and Museum at The Ohio State University, which actually contains the world's largest collection of materials related to cartoons and comics. There's also Michigan State University's library's their comic art collection, which contains the world's largest collection of comic books, more than 350,000 titles. And this collection is headed by Randall W. Scott, who literally wrote the book on comics librarianship. And there's also the graphic novel collection at Columbia University, located in Butler Library. This collection began in 2005 with only 3 titles, and today it's actually expanded to more than 14,000 titles. I discovered this collection roughly 3 years ago, stumbling in the stacks, and my jaw literally dropped. Tears formed in my eyes. I was just in complete nirvana. I was in pure bliss. This was my happy space. That's not only because I'm a library professional, but I also consider myself a comics creator, independent comics creator, a writer. And so seeing all these resources here at my fingertips was just, it brought a complete state of euphoria to me. But it also did bring a question in regards to access to these materials. I was concerned with how other comic creators might gain access to these. Could they access them? Did they have access to these spaces? And therefore, it brought up my research question, are there any limitations in regards to accessing comic books and graphic novel collections at academic libraries and archives? I began with a literature review, mainly of these 2 books, as you can see here. Graphic Novels and Comics in Libraries and Archives by Robert Weiner, as well as Comics and Critical Librarianship, Reframing the Narrative in Academic Libraries by Pipemere and Grimm. To begin, this first book was published in 2010. Weiner's book is a very basic introduction to comic librarianship. It includes many topics, some of which include collection development of comics and original artwork. It also gives a very basic overview of reader's advisory, as well as goes into the topics of outreach programming and best archival practices for comic books and graphic novels. Published a couple of years ago in 2019, Comics and Critical Librarianship by Pipemere and Grimm offers more of a stepping stone from the last book, kind of like an advanced theory in comics librarianship. It includes more articles based on collection development, where to go through from go through from just a basic collection to a more advanced collection. It also goes into the pedagogical benefits of having and using comic books in institution academia. It also includes the importance of having diverse representation of comics and creators within your collection. And it also goes into more detail on various ways for outreach and programming. But what I noticed within these two books is they did not technically go into the areas of access, especially with unaffiliated users. This kind of led to a gap in the literature and actually led to more questions and answers, such as what does access look like at academic libraries and archives? Are these institutions encouraging inclusivity in regards to access? And what does unaffiliated user access look like at academic libraries? So from here, I actually decided to continue my literature review by looking at unaffiliated user access in general. Luckily for me, in the past 2 decades, a lot of information has been written about unaffiliated user access. A good summary is just to say that following the post-war period to the 1980s, unaffiliated user access was generally wide open to much of the public, but from the 1980s onward, that access has been waning. There's been more limitations in regards to paying to gain entry to academic institutions. So this actually helped me develop my primary question into some secondary questions, such as trying to figure out what the nature of these academic and, graphic novel and comic collections are. What does the programming and outreach look like at each various institution? What does access to the collections look like, as well as what's just circulation for their materials? And in particular, what is unaffiliated user access? So my methodology here is I decided to survey academic librarians and archivists who work with comic book and graphic novel collections, specifically in North America, just to make it a little bit easier on my part. My sample population was mainly derived from this wonderful Appendix A that was included in Brian Flota's article that appeared in Comics and Critical Librarianship. From here, and with some other information at hand, I derived 23 institutions in total that I desired to survey. The research tool that I used was, as I mentioned, a survey. I decided to use Google Forms as it's most commonly used at academic institutions. And I kept it pretty simple with 19 multiple choice questions, including some additional comments, which were optional if anyone wanted to include any, giving me both qualitative as well as quantitative data. The distribution for the survey was provided via a direct email link, and then a shareable link if anybody wanted to share it to any other professionals. So here are my findings from the 20 known institutions that I surveyed. 19 respondents got back to me, providing me with a response rate of 82%, which I'm very happy with. And I will now go into some of the findings as well as each subfield for some of the questions that I asked that I'd like to highlight. So for this first subfield, nature of the collection, my question is your institution's collection available to find online? 63.2% answered yes to this question, 21.1% answered somewhat. Next question, does your institution offer a digital collection of comics and graphic novels? 57.9% answered no, whereas 31.6% answered somewhat. Second category, programming and outreach. The question is, are for credit courses offered at your institution on the topic of comics and graphic novels? 78.9% answered yes to this question. Follow-up question, does your institution offer outreach programming on the topics of comics and graphic novels? Another good majority answered here with 68.4% yes, 21.1% answered somewhat. Next topic, in regards to access and circulation, I asked, do your users need to make arrangements with staff to access the institution's collections? A small majority here answered 36.8% said yes, 31.6% said somewhat, showing a little bit of a barrier of entry, with 26.3% who said no. Next question, do materials from your institution's collection circulate? Small majority here said with 42.1% said no, the items do not circulate, whereas 31.6% said yes, 21.1% said somewhat. I'll just note here that of the 19 responses, some archives are included. So that's where I feel the small majority comes from, is those archives answering this question. I did have limiters set, so those who answered no would kind of wean out throughout the rest of the survey. Follow-up category, unaffiliated user access. The question is your outreach programming offered to unaffiliated users? A good majority, 82.4% answered yes here. A very small minority answered no. Next question, can unaffiliated users borrow materials from your collections? Split evenly, we have 45.5% who answered both yes and somewhat, with a very small minority, 9.1%, who said no of 11 responses. And this is the main question that I really wanted to get to in my survey. Do unaffiliated users have to pay for borrowing privileges at your university? Whereas 50% answered no, which is great, we still see 30% answered yes, and roughly 20% answered somewhat. So there's definitely a pay to enter barrier. I will note that some qualitative data did suggest that some of the institutions suggested access was made via interlibrary loan. So some quick takeaways here. I'll just say digital collections of comic books and graphic novels are not common yet at these institutions. A majority of the institutions do offer 4-credit courses in programming related to comics and graphic novels. Special collections archives usually require appointments, whereas general collections do not. And there are some limitations that are placed on unaffiliated users, mainly such as borrowing materials. So where to go from here with the results? I think it's important that we recognize that access does remain somewhat limited, especially in regards to unaffiliated users, and that's mainly as a result of these paywalls and barriers to entry. I think it's important as library professionals that we recognize this and try to rectify it. My aim here is also to continue the study. My hope is to actually survey comic creators who utilize materials from these libraries and discover what's the impact. And here are my resources. And thank you so much for listening to my presentations. If you have any questions or comments, you could reach me via email or social media. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. That's a great last image to use there. Okay, our next lightning round is by Stephanie Evers-Ard, who is the Social Sciences Librarian at the University of South Alabama's Marx Library.
Let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so hi, my name is Stephanie Evers-Ard. I am the Social Sciences Librarian at the Marx Library at the University of South Alabama in Mobile, Alabama, and I'm also the coordinator of our student engagement program. Today, I'm going to talk to you about a very popular in-person program that we moved online in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. So first, a little bit about the student engagement program. This is a team of library staff and librarians. We are responsible for the library's social media and public relations, and we also plan displays, programs, and events in the library and on campus for both students and faculty. One of our most popular events was a poetry and pizza open mic. This occurred twice, once for National Poetry Month in the spring semester, and then again for Banned Books Week in the fall semester. And at these events, students could read original poems, or they could bring a poem written by a favorite author. We also provided poetry selections for them to choose from, and of course, free pizza. These events were really successful. At the first one in spring 2019, we had 45 attendees and 24 different readers. And then in the fall 2019, we had 98 attendees. We actually ran out of chairs, and 34 different readers, and lots of positive comments and requests to do this event again in the future. And we were planning to do so in spring 2020, but of course, the COVID-19 pandemic complicated that for us. All in-person classes, services, and activities were canceled. And because of that, we felt like student engagement was actually more important than ever. So we wanted to try to go ahead with the event. We wondered, is it even possible to do this kind of open mic event online? And would students even bother to attend if there's no free pizza, right? So I know we talk a lot about incentives attracting people to events. So we developed a plan to recreate the event. The first goal was to foster the same sense of community that we felt in the face-to-face events. The second one was to create an environment that felt safe and comfortable for students to express themselves. And then finally, we wanted to make sure we distinguish this event from all of the other online stuff that was happening in classes, seminars, meetings. Our entire world lived in the computer. So we wanted to somehow distinguish this event. So we decided to embrace a new work from home norm. We couldn't provide pizza with the students, so we kind of went along with this, which back in April 2020 was still kind of cute, this idea of working from home in your pajamas. So we encouraged students to wear their coziest pajamas to the event. And we were being a little bit cheeky too, because we knew this differed from classes where a lot of professors were complaining that they were attending class in pajamas, or even from like bed, like still sitting in bed when they came to class. We also reached out to different departments and organizations on campus to collaborate with them. We worked with the Honors English Composition Program. We offer an MA in creative writing, so we worked with that program as well. We reached out to the Creative Writing Club on campus, which is the USA JAG Writers, as well as the Center for Academic Excellence, which is our tutoring center. So these are all people who helped us promote the event and encouraged their students to attend. We also wanted to make sure we promoted the event really well. A lot of our attendance at events, I think, came from people who were going to be in the library anyway. So since this was taking place in a virtual space, we wanted to make sure that people knew about the event. We do have a very strong social media presence, so we were able to utilize that. You can see an example of one of our Instagram posts here. As I mentioned before, we had a lot of people who were helping us collaborating with us. So we asked them to promote the event. And we also shared the event using the campus email digest, which allowed us to target students. Moving the program to Zoom was an obvious choice because Zoom is available free to our students and faculty. We used a Google form for event registration rather than the built-in Zoom registration so that students could also indicate their desire to read. And I hosted the event myself, and the other members of our engagement team helped me run the event. They did different things, like they watched the chat and watched for any misbehavior. And we were concerned about that. In particular, we were concerned about Zoom safety because a couple of weeks prior to our event, our student center had held an event and they had been Zoom bombed with some pretty nasty videos. So we were really concerned about that happening. We wanted to make sure students felt safe coming into the space, that they were only people from our institution would be there. So we made sure that we sent the link and password right before the event, so only those people would have it. We didn't publicize it on social media. As the host, I granted video and microphone privileges only to the current speaker. And as I said before, we were monitoring the chat for any inappropriate behavior. This did not happen. I feel like our safety measures worked really well. Because it was online, we also felt like we had a really big responsibility to show up with energy. As you know, when you're on Zoom, you're often just talking to a bunch of black boxes. So as host, I felt especially responsible for this. So we went all in. Here's a picture of me in my purple pajamas, holding a Mary Oliver book on the day of the event. We provided special Zoom backgrounds, including room 181, which is my Zoom background right now. This is where the face-to-face events occurred, so it was familiar to students who had been to the face-to-face events before. I facilitated the reading, providing gentle commentary and observations to move between readers and to encourage them. And students were able to interact with me and with each other using the Zoom chat feature. Of course, the best part is listening to the students. And we had done these readings before, and this one was especially poignant because a lot of students shared original poetry describing their own experiences with the ongoing pandemic. So they talked about their isolation, their stress, the kinds of things that they were experiencing. So this was a really valuable opportunity for them to express themselves. And it was a really big success, and we were very surprised because it was online. We didn't have that food incentive. So we were a little bit worried about attendance. We had 48 people attend. We had 17 different people read either their original work or poems that they selected. And we actually had people volunteering during the event asking, they changed their mind. They got in there and they suddenly felt comfortable. They're like, hey, can I read a poem now? Or they had already read and they asked if they could read again. In fact, it was so successful, we wondered if we could do it again. A lot of students at the end of the first event asked us if we could do another one. So we decided to plan one for 2 weeks later. We're trying to get one in before final exams. We already had the groundwork laid, so we figured we'd go forward with it. This time we did it in the evening and we referenced the original event. We called it Poetry and Pizza Stay at Home Edition. And we encouraged students to bring their own slice of pizza to the Zoom event. And we did pizza themed marketing. For instance, we did an Instagram post where the library faculty and staff shared their favorite pizza toppings. It received a lot of engagement. And this one went really well too, even so close to the first one. We had 32 people attend the event and 15 different readers. So here's some of the feedback that I snatched from the chat when these events were happening. I just kind of put some of my favorites in here. It was overwhelmingly positive. You can see someone says, looking forward to the next meeting. They want to do it again. A lot of these were responses to other people reading their own poems. So I'm so happy everyone is sharing. Y'all lit is probably my favorite one. Everyone was really, really interactive and responsive. So looking back on these two virtual events, the Student Engagement Committee recognized a few things. We realized that students will attend an event even without an incentive like free food. But we still want to give them food. And now that we're back in the building, we're looking forward to being able to do that. But what this told us was that they were showing up, they weren't getting food, they weren't getting extra credit, that some kind of important need was being met. And as we develop future programs, we're going to spend more time thinking about how we can identify and fulfill those student needs, especially events like this one that allowed students a chance to express themselves. Okay, so thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. That was really interesting. And it's nice to see that you got a good turnout the second time too. Sometimes you do it once and then, you lose them. So that's great. Our last lightning round speaker is Jill Locascio, who is the Associate Librarian for Systems, Digital, and Technical Services at the SUNY College of Optometry.
Oops, forgot to unmute myself, but now I'm here and I'm gonna jump right in as soon as my screen responds. So about a year and a half ago, I embarked on a project that was really more of like an unfocused curiosity, where I was wondering how our users are searching and what types of search terms they're using, the kinds of searches they're doing, the results those search terms are yielding, and are they finding what they're looking for? And if they're not, is there anything that I can do to help them out? So I looked at two reports in analytics, and one is the Primo Popular Searches report, and the other one is the Primo Zero Results report. And I would run these on a monthly basis and then take all of the search strings and throw them in a spreadsheet. And as the months went by, I started sifting through the data and was able to narrow my focus as far as what I wanted to really look at. And so I decided that I wanted to look at known item searches. And so I manually executed every single search. Luckily at the College of Optometry, we're quite small and specialized. So I did all of these searches in Primo myself and divided them into yes or no, was the search successful? And the way I define success is whether the search string yielded the known item on the first page of results. And then I took all the unsuccessful searches and tried to figure out why was the search unsuccessful and what, if anything, can be done to turn it into a successful search. So unsuccessful searches accounted for almost 40% of the searches. And that high number scared me at first. And then I realized that the two reports I'm looking at don't give a full picture of everything being searched. And the inclusion of the zero results report means that everything's going to be skewed towards unsuccessful searches. But that's good because that's the stuff I wanted to look at. There are several reasons why a search would fail. And I had three main categories. One is that the known item is not discoverable in the system. Another category is that the user search string contained a spelling or punctuation error that Primo couldn't account for. And then the final category is, I called it search errors, and it's just a fundamental misunderstanding of how Primo works, more specifically treating Primo like it's Google. And Google is just far more robust and forgiving of spelling errors. So an example of a non-discoverable search was this article, and I really felt bad for the user because I saw this, they were trying to search for this in so many different ways, with quotes, without quotes, so on and so forth. And the reason why it's not discoverable is because it's from a small optometric publication that's not indexed in the CDI. However, it was discoverable elsewhere. I should mention that not only did I run the unsuccessful searches in Primo, I ran them in other places as well. One of those places being Google Scholar, and measured the success rate on in those places. And the success rate, as you can imagine, in Google Scholar was 90-something%. So this one was findable in Google Scholar. Other things that weren't discoverable were kind of like niche trade publications, newslettery type stuff, conference abstracts often. And not everything was discoverable in Google Scholar. There's a lot of kind of, I guess, what would be called gray literature out there that was a lot harder to track down. So spelling and punctuation errors were interesting, not just in what they revealed about our users, but in what they revealed about how Primo deals with this kind of stuff. In this example, the word thalamocortical is misspelled. There should be another A in there. And so Primo couldn't pull it up, the search failed. Yet that doesn't happen with every misspelling. In this example, the word spectacle is misspelled, and Primo could still pull up the article. So it made me start scratching my head when I was looking at this stuff. Here's another example where the word is Ceres or Cirrus, don't know how it's pronounced, missing its S, and Primo could pull up the article. But I was thinking maybe it has something to do with the length of the title. There's more opportunities for matches maybe on the index records with the words. That's one of my theories. I'm not entirely sure, even having looked at the documentation. Also, something interesting I noticed was that I would run one of these searches in, say, January of 2020, and it would be unsuccessful. And then I would run it again in October of 2020, and the search would be successful. So something was happening. I don't know if it's just records being fortified or what have you, but I mean, I'll never complain about an unsuccessful search turning into a successful search. Another common error is the user leaving either the last letter off of the last word or the first letter off of the first word. And this happens so often, I realize it is a result of faulty copy pasting. This happens a lot. And as with before, sometimes the Primo can figure out what the person wanted and pull it up, and other times Primo can't. And I'm assuming it has something to do with the metadata on the index records and how it makes matches with those underlined words. But still, just that one missing Y off the first example of the word retinopathy made the search fail. If you put that Y on, then boom, number one result. So as with before, in other instances, doesn't matter that there are missing spaces. The searches are always pulled up. And I'm almost certain a couple of these, when I first did the searches, they were unsuccessful, but now they're successful. Go figure, I can't quite figure it out. Also, something interesting I found was sometimes just the mere presence or absence of a hyphen could make a search fail. Some more interesting spelling and punctuation stuff is their did you mean functionality. I'm not surprised that Primo could figure out that the first example is meant to be psychology, but I was surprised that Primo could figure out that metastasis was misspelled, but it couldn't figure out that degenerative was misspelled. I included the link to Primo's documentation where they describe how a lot of this works. I've read it a couple times. I was hoping to fully understand it by today for this presentation, but I just don't. Every time I think I understand it, I find something that contradicts what I had thought it meant. So search errors. People like to just take a bunch of stuff and throw it into a search box and expect that they're going to find what they want right away. And in the case of these two examples, the missing article title, even though it has everything else on the article, the missing article title makes the search fail. In the third example, if the user had just searched for that PubMed ID number, the search would have been successful. But by having PMID : beforehand, the search failed. And it's hard to blame the user for that because it makes logical sense to search that way. People are used to searching that way in Google, but it's just not the way Primo works. Same thing with full citations. Sometimes throwing in a full citation pulls up the article. Actually, often it does when the citation is totally correct. But I call these everything but the kitchen sink searches. There's a lot more opportunity for things to go wrong. With the first example, I swear when I started this project, that was an unsuccessful search, but now it's successful, so I won't complain. The last example there's a missing space between the article title and the name of the journal. And that one teeny tiny missing space is enough to cause the search to fail. But if it were present, it would the article would have been pulled up right away. So solutions. One is to edit the no results found screen. I made it a little chattier and said what went wrong. Typos are common, so check your spelling and punctuation in bold. And if there's no errors there, click on that link and then their search terms, their search will be executed in Google Scholar. And since that success rate was in the 90-something%, hopefully they'll have more success at least getting the known item and then clicking on the library link and being brought to the full text should we have it. Finally, this is an opportunity to improve our library instruction and our how-tos and give people more clarity in our instructional sessions about the capabilities of Primo and how Primo's brain works. Really stress that Primo is not Google. When discovery systems first proliferated, it was really exciting to kind of meet the user where they are. But Primo has a lot less to work with than Google does. It's not, Google's a juggernaut. So people don't always realize that. And it's also an opportunity for maybe some more communication with Ex Libris, start a dialogue, because I did notice that their did you means have gotten so much better over the past year. And even some of those unsuccessful searches that later became successful searches make me think that maybe I should talk to them a little more and maybe understand some of that documentation I don't quite understand right now. And so that is it.
Thank you very much. I've also looked at those reports and I want to reach out to the ones who spelled something wrong and never corrected it. Like, no, don't go, come back. Thank you. Thank you to all of the lightning round speakers. It's really hard to condense what could probably be a 30 or 40-minute talk into 10 minutes, and they all did it and still managed to really get meaningful information out. So thank you. We have plenty of time for questions at this point. So if you'd like to put them in the chat, I will read them, or you can probably have the ability to unmute yourselves, I think. I'm not sure. I'm going to ask the first question while people have a chance to get theirs typing, and it is for Jamia and Twanna. When you're talking about mentoring, what role does imposter syndrome play in that for new librarians, for the mentors too? I think it's something that a lot of new librarians deal with, and it's really hard to convince someone, you're good, you got this. What are your thoughts on that?
So I will jump in this because that's a key thing where even though I've been in profession for 6 years now, I still suffer from imposter syndrome. And so for me, it is a reality, but also acknowledging that, you know, the work that I do is so important, and I try to pass it along to my mentees, you know, and support the work that they're doing, and to reframe how they're looking at themselves, you know, because I think a lot of the time we have a we're hypercritical of ourselves, more so than anyone else that could ever be. But there's also a lot of comparisons that are constantly happening, you know, and so acknowledging that and just being like, you know, you are who you are, and focusing on the strengths. And so for me, I try to bring myself and my mentee back down to reality, and just be like, you got this, I'm here, we will struggle through this together.
Thank you. Yeah, Susan comments that even experienced librarians get imposter syndrome. Even mentors wonder, am I actually a mentor? Am I a good mentor? You have imposter syndrome about your ability to fix someone else's imposter syndrome, I guess. There's another question for Jamia and Twanna. Do you have any advice or strategies for mentoring reluctant mentees?
Oh, that is an interesting question. And so there's been some times where I've had to chase after, that sounds bad, but had to kind of like, you know, reach out multiple times to mentees. I think one thing is that some of the people that I mentor are overachievers and overambitious. And so a lot of the times it has been, you know, checking in on them, but also giving them their space. Just being like, I'm here, you know, whenever you need me, you know, like, you know, a multitude of ways. You can text me, you can drop me a tweet, you can DM, like whatever makes you feel comfortable. But some of the times is recognizing that sometimes I'm not the mentor that they need. And so it's connecting them to someone else. Because I know that like as a mentor, I can't be the mentor for everyone. I believe in having a multitude of mentors. You can't have one person for everything. And so in that case, if they're reluctant, trying to parse out why they're reluctant, you know, try to figure out what's happening. But in that case, you know, instead of ghosting happens, because that happens, you know, coming to an end to say like, you know what, this isn't working. Is this possible to, you know, and just being like, you know, it's a pleasure. I've learned from you, you've learned from me, and kind of go your separate ways. Jamia, is there anything you would like to add?
Yes, you said everything that I was going to say. So yeah, nothing to add.
Well, there's another question for the two of you and then one for Ryan. The first one is, do you have any advice for libraries where the current staff is not BIPOC and an incoming staff member is? Thoughts about whether to look for a mentor outside of the library who is BIPOC or elsewhere on campus or even outside of the institution?
I will let Jamia take this and then I will back her up.
Okay, so if your staff is not BIPOC and the person you want to mentor is BIPOC, I think that's fine. However, you have to understand that this person has nuances. They have variety of identities, and you know, take the time to understand what can you offer them, and if you feel like there's someone outside of the library that can help them as well, that's great too. But it is important to have someone in the library that is mentoring a new person coming in, because it's important to know what the culture of the library is. Like I said earlier, unspoken rules that is not, you know, written in policy and stuff like that, and understanding the history of the library. Having someone to go, a go-to person in the library is important. And if there isn't anyone there that's capable of mentoring a BIPOC person, then some questions questions need to be asked and to figure out why that is. So nope, I'm not done, cutie. And yeah, and if you know someone outside the institution, great. Like Twanna said, having more than one mentor is important. I have more than one mentor. Twanna is not my only mentor, and I think that's great too.
And I will add that the profession is 86.7% white. So the likelihood of there being a, you know, huge amount of BIPOC folks, library workers in one space, it's not incredibly high, even if they're working at a historical Black college or university or Hispanic serving institution. And so the opportunity for that is going to happen, and I think is being cognizant of that, but also that being a part of the relationship that is talked out, because the person who is the mentee, they probably may not know how to engage, you know, and they might be looking for someone to support them in that aspect. So yeah. But I would also say, a mentor is not a supervisor. So like really, like that's something I want to stress, like, you know, because the supervisor has a lot of power, and the power dynamics is at play. But a mentor can be someone who is not just this older, younger mentality, but also having people of the same rank or status or situation as well.
Thank you. The next question from Susan, I'm not sure if it's from Ryan or not, for Ryan or not. It says, is this a mandated relationship, like the library assigns a mentor and you are supposed to follow through? I suppose anybody can answer that.
I think this might have been a clarification of the question
Okay.
that I asked.
Okay.
So I guess the reason I asked the question is the library I work at, we have kind of a mentorship situation, but I work with a lot of members in access services who are somewhat reluctant to continue their career. They're kind of happy at the place where they're at. And so that idea of pursuing them for mentorship kind of comes up in question. You know, we find a lot of staff members who we believe would excel in their career, but are a bit reluctant to even move forward. So I'm just kind of curious. I think you kind of answered this already, just like how do you chase folks who, you know, need the mentoring or but they kind of don't want it?
I mean, you know, as there's some people who like are temporarily satisfied, or there's some people who are like staff that's like, I never want to be faculty, you know, and I'm like, you know, they never want to go into like a librarianship in that sense, and that's totally fine. And if it's a structured, formal, you know, mentorship program, then focusing, and maybe it's not on like career advancement that they are interested in. Maybe it's more personal advancement, you know, and growth that they're interested in. Or maybe they're just trying to figure, maybe it's an opportunity to help them in terms of gaining new skill sets or connecting them to similar people with similar experiences, not just within the library, in your current library, you know, but others. Hopefully that made sense.
Catherine has a question for Jill. Did you say in your Google Scholar link, did you say that your Google Scholar link executes the search terms when it's clicked? And was it difficult to set up? I think this is talking about in that, sorry, your search failed.
Yes. So yes, it does execute the search terms. I did a little playing around. There's a table, the table that with the labels that where you edit that screen. I don't know the name of it off the top of my head, but I can easily look it up and let you and anyone else who wants to know. But in that table, there's a line with the label, and you. Oh, thank you, Nancy Bab in the chat. Exactly. And you can just put a little HTML and just you know, scholar.google.com, something like /Q ? And then like they format it in Alma of like maybe like two curly braces and then term or something like that, and then 2 ending curly braces, and that just it puts the search term there. I've only had it going for about a month now. It has not broken yet for me. I have not received any reports that it's broken, but I don't know that anyone would. People aren't always great about reporting that stuff. I don't know if like searches with lots of special characters or something might break it, but I haven't found it to be the case yet. But it was pretty easy for me to set up, and I'm happy to share that information.
Would it be possible for you to share that in Workplace? Because I think that sounds like a nice fix that a lot of people would want.
I would be happy to do so.
Awesome, thanks. Let's see, did I miss, are they comments or questions? Samantha was saying, Susan, it might be a chemistry thing. If people are matched by the program, it's not necessarily a good fit. This was talking about mentors who are assigned to someone. And yes, it doesn't necessarily work. We have some time left if there are any additional questions. I'm really happy to see so many people here late on a Friday, right? It's a testament to the interestingness of your topics, and people have stuck around on a Friday afternoon, so that's great.
Just one thing that we didn't get to add to our presentation, just because mentoring is a very, very huge topic, and you know, 10 minutes it's not enough time, but we also didn't have the capacity to do a much longer presentation. But one thing for people to understand, that there's some people who might have been burned by not so great mentoring relationships, you know, and so when somebody has had that happen, they're bringing that to the current mentoring relationship. And there's some people who may not understand the clear differences between a mentor, say a sponsor, say a champion, say a supervisor, and like having that clarification is very important. And I'm an advocate, and Jamia knows this, of, you know, people getting training on being a mentor, but then also being a mentee. And what does like across racial, cross generational, cross anything you could really think of, and taking that into consideration. Because as much as I would like to say, you know, I just show up as Twanna Hodge, and none of my identities, that's not the reality when I turn on my Zoom camera to work. And so being cognizant, you know, of that, and part of that, I guess, awkward icebreaker type thing in the beginning is, you know, kind of engaging in that. In terms of resources for trainings, I don't think that there's a one-stop place that I'm thinking of that provides this, but I think ALA has a page that has like different mentoring programs on what's done, and I think some of those programs might have resources. So I'm going to try to see if I can find that source and put it in the chat box, but just little mind bugs for you all to think about.
Great. We have a couple more minutes if people want to hang around. There's a link now to the mentoring page from ALA in the chat. If you're not looking at it, you can click on that now.
I'll just mention, this is April at SUNY Cobleskill. If you didn't hear it yesterday or see it in the latest issue of the newsletter, SUNYLA is starting a new awards program for mentorship.
Oh.
And it's to recognize someone, and the awardee does not have to be within SUNY. You do. So some SUNY person, if there's someone out there in Florida or wherever who has been of help to you in your career, the criteria and all that and what you need to do is going to be on our website if it's not already. You can have them be recognized for their wonderful mentorship.
Great.
And I will say, I speak too much, but it's totally fine. Jamia knows this about me. That I thought that I could not be a mentee a mentor when Jamia came along, because I was only, I think, a few years in. And I've had people who reached out to me and also been a part of formal mentoring. And if this is something that interests you as a mentor, it is okay to find someone who, and it doesn't have to be like, oh, you're going to be my mentee. It doesn't have to be that kind of creepy, you know, type thing. You know, it could start off as an informational meeting, you know, that you're, you know, for tea or whatever, or a pink drink. I'm going to get a pink drink after this, you know, and then it could morph into there. So it doesn't necessarily always have to be the mentee running after people, but you can also seek out folks. So like those who are in LAS programs, or those who are staff and have expressed interest, who may not even express interest. There's sometimes when you know someone is investing in you, that sometimes that makes all of the difference, you know. And so this is just putting that out there, that like mentoring is not the be all end all for retention, but it does help immensely, because I wouldn't be here without the many mentors that I've had from like middle school.
Right. Okay. Thank you, everyone, again. And I think there's one more session after this. I think it starts at 3:30. So thank you for coming and for spending the day. And thanks to all of our speakers.